ultimate human reach, the quest of humanity. It has always been human quest to achieve immortality. The shape and form this manifests itself in is debatable, but its essence and concept are in conjunction with the design of their nature. That this is so is supported by some common observations. For example, self-preservation. This is by far the most basic of human instincts and is an everyday occurrence. There is no sacrifice one would not give to continue to hold on to life. All human struggle and endeavor is directed towards keeping and the preservation of it. Apart from one's own life, the only other more precious thing is the life of an offspring. In some instances, the child gets precedence over self, especially in the case of the mother, the very source of that life. A mother is so protective of the offspring that she is willing to sacrifice her own life for that of her child's. Does this not show that the flame of life is to be preserved and kept alight at all costs? To be kept constantly and continuously burning, the originally kindled flame of life would have to be passed on from generation to generation, from the past through the present and into the future. This is done by a natural cycle of transfer of the essence of survival from the parent to the child, and it is in the instinct of creatures to treat this gift or blessing of nature with the utmost care. Every generation nurtures, grooms, and evolves this essence of life and then passes it on to the next. It thus appears that one continues to live through one's offsprings, and so the spinning wheel of existence keeps turning. Is this not some form of continuity leading to immortality? If this be it, then how and why is it so? Let us examine the weave of life and its pattern. Perhaps it may give some clues. Removal of conflict. Humanity has transformed and evolved through the ages. It has developed through a selective cycle of refinement and progressed through the art of living over successive generations. This is an evolutionary process of gradually sieving and separating progress from decay, a method of preserving those qualities which aid in the survival and sustenance and the removal of the destructive ingredients. The survival process actually promotes the growth of purities but hinders impurities. The underlying adulterations are separated and eliminated, for only that which is pure and unadulterated can be a homogeneous whole and thus be capable of existence without conflict. Hence, the first rung of the ladder of immortality is the incorporation of a process for the elimination of conflict in the system. Self-perpetuating system. In the evolution of a self-developing system, of which human beings is one, each generation differs from the past and must change according to inherited or acquired principles to deal with the existing circumstance. Since the circumstance itself is changing, an overall more advanced form comes to take shape with every successive breeding. The experience and knowledge acquired by the previous group is passed on to the next one by some means of transfer, genetic perhaps, to give to it the essence of its own invaluable experience and knowledge gained and acquired in its own lifetime. Now, whether genetics can explain this is debatable, for the science itself is its infancy. This information becomes the raw material for the future generation to face the challenges of their own and thereby learn to keep their head above water. One thing, however, to be kept in mind is that the cultivation and propagation of good or right, meaning the sustaining and progressive forces, is far more laborious and demanding than the flourishing of bad or wrong, meaning the destructive or annihilating processes. This is so because the tendency of bad to multiply is much greater, and the process to do so is relatively easier than that for the inculcation of good or the pure. The destructive process is somehow revolutionary in nature, that is quick acting, whereas the constructive process is evolutionary and slower acting in nature. Also, it is human nature to seek ease, comfort and pleasure, and the wrong provides this more readily and quickly. Seen in another way, the ideal path to success is just one out of the many, and has to be sought and sorted out from the so many other roads and traps lying on the way. This sorting and selection is a laborious and tedious task which takes time, effort, energy and perseverance. Taking any other way out of the so many available may not be the best way to the goal. Though easy to acquire, it may not reach the desired end as properly. Hence, the change towards good, although slower and tedious, is however longer lasting and more durable. One concludes from this logic that in the long run, good has the quality to eventually prevail over evil. This is the apparent end towards which all religious philosophies are geared. The eventual aim being to inculcate in humans the sense of auto-creation so that they learn to overcome the ill effects of things and continue to survive and thrive. Is this not a way to immortality? The genetic effect. Modern thought and scientific advancement have illumined some interesting facts. The genetic code is a complete program of information contained at the cellular level. These cells are the building blocks for all life form. The cell-contained code covers the complete life cycle of a being. Now, all species interact, multiply, and propagate by communicating through the language of their genetic code. The information contained in the genes of an individual is the derivative of the exchange and interaction of information of its parents' constituents. The information in the parent's gene intermingles and produces a new compounded gene of the individual being developed. That the new person is a compound and not a mixture is evidenced by the fact that the new personality, while showing traits of the parents, is a completely different entity exhibiting its own separate identity and individuality. beautifully blended, yet unique. What and how will the new life shape to be depends on a number of variables, some tangible, like the physical traits of the parent, and some intangible, such as their emotional, mental, and psychic predispositions. The interplay of other factors like time, circumstance, environment, and background of the parents also seems to shape the genetic makeup of the offspring. The exact traits and the individual will acquire may not be precisely determinable. Yet, the overall effect of a group's collective behavior, its cultural pattern, and the influence of society on it can be transferred as a common pattern of the whole. An honest, hard-working group is likely to pass on the good habits to its next generation. Similarly, the bad traits of another group of people will most likely be picked up by its progeny. The study of genes and their behavior has been mainly done in the physical field, that is, how genetic mutations result in the manifestation of different organs and organisms in both plants and animals. Genetics and its repercussions on the psyche and the spirituality are wide open fields for research and development. A complete vista of knowledge lies untapped at the moment, and it is felt that information from this angle may revolutionize human thinking altogether. The conquest of good over bad is again a process of conscious struggle with evil. Seeing the evolutionary processes of human development, one concludes that this is in the nature of the entire creation. As noted earlier, survival is the first and the most basic instinct of every living thing, and the action that each creature takes to preserve itself depends upon its makeup and its position along the hierarchy on the table of ability, with humans being at the top. This means that human beings have the greatest freedom to effect change in themselves, their environment, and perhaps also beyond. Now, as just discussed, the genetic phenomena is a natural process that is being presently studied and decoded by man, and that the genetic cycle is being experimented with and manipulated in order to study and observe the various outcomes. If the changes being made by scientists are in the right direction, it will have positive effect and progress will have been achieved. But if the change is negative or detrimental to the natural scheme of things, the result will be degradation and eventual destruction of the humankind. If human interference in the genetic process is in conformity with the natural design of the system, it will promote and aid in the development of the species as a whole, and they will progress as a result. However, if human probes in the process are opposed to its natural sequence and direction, distortions will be visible along the way. They will eventually be eliminated as a consequence of the built-in inviolability of the overall natural design and its inherent quality of self-preservation. This, in the end, is the whole beauty of it. It is, in the essence, this very same property that nature hands down to humans in the form of self-preservation and struggle for survival. They over other living beings have the added advantage of possessing an intellect, an instrument of probe, conscious inquiry, analysis, self-correction, and subsequent conscious evolution. Let us now examine some examples of things with evil effects and how humans can avoid and prevent their harm. A plan of operation. Sex is one of the greatest of human pleasures, and its outcome is the greatest of their achievement, which is the propagation of self through the creation of another. In the past, the outcome of the sexual act was mostly beyond human control. The general rule was that sex usually resulted in childbirth. To keep the lineage straight and direct descending from a selected ancestry, it had to be closely watched and monitored. Marriage was the institution for preserving and monitoring racial heritage in the desired direction. The institution of marriage was thus sanctified, and this sanctity was zealously guarded. That sex was a natural urge and desire, although denied by some schools of thought, could not be done away with. Thus, to deal with it, early marriages were invoked, and sex outside of wedlock was shunned and abhorred. So sex became a taboo. Religion played the greatest role in influencing human sexual behavior by propagating a code of morality all its very own and linking it to the dictates of a superhuman reality. This all-encompassing influence or existence seems to operate under a grand master plan of its own, by which it propagates various species. This plan is universal and valid for all time. Presumably, it is so basic that each and everything, animate or inanimate, follows it subconsciously or instinctively. However, the case of human beings seems to be different. They challenge it and are bent upon changing it according to their mental makeup and intellectual curiosity. They may be able to do so, but first they have to decode and understand it and fathom its meaning and essence. The main problem arises when human intellect gets to become egocentric and claims to know it all. It then tries to decode the essence of the plan and the nature of the reality despite the limitations of human knowledge and the inadequacy of facts available at their disposal. Other means of information behind rational thought may hold the key to knowledge in that direction. The domain of instincts and or subsurface enlightenment prove useful, because as we see that at those levels communication with nature goes along the path of least resistance and the information flows smoothly and easily from the sender to the receiver and vice versa. This intuition or sixth sense and perhaps revelation are a direct link with the mysterious cosmic consciousness, which is the metaphysics and essence of existence. This is so because consciousness prompts logic and reasoning, which act as hindrances or filters in the flow of information, whereas at instinctive or subconscious levels, reasoning and logic are bypassed or suppressed. The case of sages, sadhus, Sufis, and perhaps prophets is a point to consider in the realm of direct communication with nature. These elevated individuals demonstrate enlightenment of some or all aspect of nature's functions and the wisdom behind it, and thus show more poise and balance in their lives. Most of us, on the other hand, are in a state of agitation. We have yet to learn the subtle communique and message of our own natures, which may be hindered by material distractions of life. A fresh attempt to fathom the plan. Keeping the above preamble in mind, let's make a renewed effort to fathom nature's plan of determining, directing, and raising the creation to the level of self-regeneration and thus perpetuation and immortality. It would make no sense if all creation was to have been meaninglessly brought forth and be then allowed to perish after having achieved so much progress and uplift in its psyche and spirit. To make some sense of all this apparent confusion and chaos has been the subject of all human curiosity and endeavor in every age in society. This is another such attempt in light of the direction of contemporary information and present human thought. True purpose of religion. Religious thought, as discussed elsewhere, has itself developed and changed with human progress. The fundamentalists who practice religion in its most rigid form tend to stunt the growth of mental curiosity and intellectual probe because they limit and restrain man at a lower level and position God at a higher and altogether different station of abode. The one becomes the creator and controller, and the other the subjugated and helplessly controlled. Also, religious orthodoxy inbreeds stagnation and unconscious ritualistic repetition. The unnatural outcome of unconscious and unquestioned and blind ritual practice is introversive and becomes an end in itself, rather than being expressive, exploratory, and a means to an end, that is, to lead towards self-uplift and personal growth, which would surely have been its primary aim. Further, religious fundamentalism has negation as its basis, for it promotes religion by saying, "Don't do this, this is not allowed, that is against the rules," etc., etc. Whereas the main aim of religious education should perhaps be to guide to the basis and the underlying need of various religious thought processes and disciplines and how they bring about self-amelioration. They should be able to advise how the practice of the ritual can lead towards its main aim of moral uplift and character building, which is essential for struggle and survival of a humane human race and the eventual end game of good conquering evil. They should be able to explain how the prayer and worship are a road to the health and emancipation of the faculties of the mind, body, and soul, the triad of human existence. That their essence lies not in performing of certain tenets, but in effect the releasing of the constructive juices of each one's personality and harmonizing the functions of the human triad. that one may gain fresher ideas and thoughts and grasp newer concepts. These would then open and liberate the intellect rather than confine it. Religious education should be a means of accepting natural evolution rather than fighting it. It should teach to welcome rather than reject realistic change. It should be educative and helpful in training humans to be able to harness their animal nature and direct it towards humanism and progress, and to eventually overcome the barbarism of within. Channelizing human nature. A little closer study of humanity through history shows that humans continue to have the same basic animal instincts they have always possessed, both good and bad. For example, the instinct of curiosity, competition, instinct of self-preservation, protection, destruction, etc. Only those who have been able to understand and channelize these natural behaviors have stepped ahead and furthered the cause of the entire human race. It may be questioned whether humans have really progressed. They are still the most brutal and ruthless of creatures. They still have uncontrolled lust, and in reality have furthered their lustful pursuits, and so on and so forth. While all this is perhaps true, it may be pointed out that the basic instincts of human beings, because of their animal origin, will remain and continue to follow them. It is at the level of intellect that they can develop and advance, and its control over instincts improved. This comes about through the progressive and refining process of genetic inheritance coupled with the reforming aspects of knowledge and education. The advance or progress can thus be made at the level of thought. If the thought or intellect progress, it will lead to the conscious improvement of word and then eventually deed. For otherwise, unconscious and untamed action is nothing but raw animal behavior. Now, when intellectual development takes place, higher concepts can be grasped and understood and eventually put to use, contributing in the forward push of the frontiers of human achievement. What will all this lead to, and what, if any, is life's final goal? From an optimistic point of view, the entire human progress is aimed in the direction of self-discovery and conscious self-enhancement. This can be better explained by starting at the beginning, that is, going back to the story of creation as told by religious accounts. If, as is said, that man is made in the image of God, then it is through a study of himself that he may infer the nature of the deity and also perhaps the reason for his own creation. It is this aim and the pursuit of it that keeps man alive and kicking. If there were no purpose to life, it would not have come about in the first case, or been brought forth anyway. Also, the core of the existentialist philosophy of the meaninglessness and insignificance of human life becomes meaningless itself as it does not stand up to the scrutiny of the purpose of its own statement. However infinitesimal and apparently insignificant in comparison, each and every creature, from the gnat to a giant, has a position of its own in reference to its context in the space-time continuum. If the truth of the scientific fact that no two things can occupy the same position in time and space at a given moment can be fathomed, then the importance and value of each and every created thing becomes to be understood and comes to be accepted. Now the contribution of everything adds up bit by bit, and the net result of all action becomes the target for the subsequent act. This, in fact, is the gist of the moment and is shaped in the very mold of space and time. Consider it another way. An act of one affects another being or thing, which in turn reacts in some way of its own. This action and reaction produce a situation. The overall result of all the different situations form a condition in time. At any given moment, this condition of time is known as destiny, which is the net result of the action of one and the reaction of all others. This is thus being called the gist of the moment. In the realm of inanimate cosmos, the laws of science and their application is relatively less complicated, and the destiny equation is simpler, and various outcomes may be estimated or calculated scientifically or mathematically. Now, destiny in humans is a dynamic process, for what the action of one person will be depends on the exercise of his or her free will at that moment. What will be the outcome of a certain act depends on the reaction of the affected being, who in turn has a free will of its own, according to which he or she will react. Since there are so many variables along the way, it is not certain what the gist of any one's action will be. However, it is undeniable that the more profound the action, the wider are its repercussions. Also, the more appropriate the act, that is, the right thing done at the right time, the deeper is the effect and thus the reaction. Total knowledge and information is the key, which in the case of human action is far more difficult to compute. While it is humanly impossible to tame all the information of a given moment and manipulate it to affect destiny, it may be possible by some divine entity, and again only by that divinity which is immanently indispensable and is the inherent necessity of all things and everything. Being fully aware and conscious and knowledgeable of all happenings all the time. This idea has been discussed in more detail in the nature of a natural deity. Derivation of inferences. As discussed earlier, it is human nature to seek pleasure and ease. And if this pleasure can bring some ease, so much the better. Non-marital sex provides the fulfillment of such a desire, giving pleasure and at the same time freedom from responsibility and restraint, which are the natural outcome of marriage, that is, a family and its subsequent responsibilities. However, as we have discussed, progress and development do not come lightly, and that the species would not develop to their full potential without the time-constrained incubation and maturing of the genetic cycle as a whole. generation after generation. The process of passing through the passage of history, with all its informative and educative impact, has been an integral part of human uplift and progress. All the happenings of the millennia past have played their due role in bringing humanity to the current threshold of existence. It is in the interest of the deity itself that sex be declared a taboo, because as we have seen, indiscreet sexual pursuits are an adulteration and detrimental to the promotion of a genetically unadulterated breed. This is needed for the development and accumulation of purity. That is a prerequisite of unity, which, as mentioned, is imperative for getting a homogeneous whole. So perhaps the Grand Master Plan itself promotes the human code of morality. Now, even today, we are vulnerable to the fury of nature as we were in the infancy of civilization and all through the process of history. Yet, the great difference is that our understanding of these phenomena has improved and we have developed newer means to protect our survival. We have nonetheless also learnt about new means of self-destruction. It remains to be seen how we will fare with the passage of time. Were we to annihilate all we have so laboriously achieved, it would annul the whole idea of the elaborate process that nature takes us through. As noted earlier, this would be an exercise in futility. The fact of the matter is that human beings are slowly gaining more awareness of themselves and their environment with the passage of time and expansion of knowledge. They are learning new techniques and developing new methods to accomplish old tasks more effectively and with more precision, and as a consequence are moving upwards on the scale of awareness, both in the micro and the macrocosms. The zenith of all their achievement would be to learn to replicate themselves, thereby achieving perpetuation and thus conscious immortality. So the only logical end would be accumulation of the experiment of self-discovery to the level of self-replication and a full appreciation of nature's grand master plan. Whether this is at all possible is another matter, for there are a number of pitfalls along the way. However, if human effort towards immortality is achievable, then the image would have attained the secret of the source and thus become capable of conscious participation in nature's scheme of things. Reflect on what Ghalib says about the strength of desire and the attainment of it in the beauty of the following verse. वाह कर दिए हैं शौक ने बंदे नकाबे हुस्न गैरज निगाह अब कोई हायल नहीं रहा. Desire's intensity has set apart the drawn veils of beauty. Except for the sight itself, now there is no hindering entity. The desire is so strong that it has penetrated even the cover of the veil, and the true nature of the beauty has now become apparent. The vision is so near and clear that except for the eye itself, there is nothing to hold back the view and perception. Just reflect. Thank you.